Okay, we are back. This week, we are covering mental health coping skills. I am Traci with Baca County Public Health. We decided to go with this topic this week because we have noticed more interest in mental health in the communities that we're serving, specifically the stigma that's surrounding mental health. And today, I thought we'd kind of deep dive the history of mental health as well as coping skills that can help fight this stigma and also help people, navigate those situations a bit better. Okay, so let's get started. We're gonna have like a little mini history lesson, so it'll be exciting. Obviously, this is very casual, so if you have any questions, feel free to chime in. Okay, so history of mental health. Okay, history of mental health, we'll get started here. The question of how to address mental health issues has existed since the beginning of time. Answers have evolved across cultures and millennia, adapting as the understanding that the human condition has changed in the face of advances in science, chemistry, medicine, and psychology. The history and evolution of mental health and mental health treatment is not always a flattering story, though, but it does explain a great deal about how and why the landscape of mental health treatment is what it is today and where it could possibly go next. Mental health treatment in ancient times, they were often the result of beliefs that supernatural causes such as demonic possession, curses, sorcery, or a vengeful god were behind strange symptoms. Remedies were everything from mystical to very brutal, and that could be why people today don't like talking about mental health, right? Because there's a really dark history behind it. If you've ever done research on that, it can be very, very sad. And that's actually kind of what I came across today as I was kind of developing this PowerPoint. So anthropological discoveries dating back as far as 5000 BCE showed that evidence of triphoning, the process of opening a hole in the skull, allowed evil spirits that inhabited the head of the mentally ill to be released, thereby curing the affliction. This, of course, resulted in skull fractures, migraines, and mental illness. The process wasn't always fatal, though. Some skulls showed signs of healing, and some survivors may have lived for years afterwards, which likely encouraged the practice because they thought, oh, well, they're healed and they're still functioning, so they're okay, so we should keep doing this. So that's kind of the thought process back then. Again, this was, as back as 5000 BCE, so it's been a minute. But when violence wasn't used, priest doctors like those in ancient Mesopotamia would use rituals based on religion and superstition, since they believed that demonic possession was the reason behind mental disturbances. These rituals included everything from prayer to atonement, exorcisms, incantations, and other forms of spirituality. And some shamans would also resort to sorts of threats, bribery, and punishment if those methods were unsuccessful. There was something interesting about this, although, in that ancient Egyptians, they actually were the ones with the most progressive ideas of the time. There was evidence in documents dating as far as the 6th century BCE to identify brain as a source of mental functioning. And as such, there were coping skills that were developed from medicine men of the Nile. They kind of believed and kind of taught people that recreational activities such as music and dancing or painting could actually relieve some of these symptoms and work towards some semblance of normalcy, similar to that of modern coping strategies used in today's facilities. There's also something called the four humors, and people that are in this line of work, maybe you've already heard of these things, but the four humors, there was a standard belief across many ancient cultures that mental illness was seen as supernatural, usually the result of an angry god or goddess. And then to switch this belief to a more understandable cause, people within these civilizations believed that a victim or a group of people had trespassed their deity and they were being punished as a result of that. So early European philosophers pushed the idea of mental illness forward, and the Greek physician Hippocrates rejected this idea that mental instability was a result of supernatural wrath, and that imbalances in thinking and behavior were actually natural occurrences within the body and brain. So that was a huge shift in how people viewed mental health and mental illness back then. So Hippocrates, Galen, and Socrates, all very smart, well-known philosophers for their time, developed this idea of the four humors, the four humors being blood, bile, black bile, and phlegm. And their thought process was that unique characteristics and personalities of humans were caused by the balance within these humors. So when a humor was out of balance, mental illness was the result. This belief persisted throughout the Middle Ages, and doctors would give patients laxatives, they would induce vomiting, they'd have leeches, blood extractions, cupping therapy, etc., to restore the body's humor balance. So I thought that was really interesting. And also that kind of, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, but that kind of ties into how we sort of view things in a sense today. It's not quite the same, but you'll see in a little bit kind of what I'm talking about. So caring for the mentally ill from a historical perspective, the first mental health hospital was founded in Baghdad in 792 CE. The Europeans, so mental health stigma has obviously existed for a long time. Europeans viewed families with mentally ill patients as a source of shame and humiliation. Many families resorted to hiding loved ones in cellars, cages, abandoning them altogether, leaving them to be like homeless within the streets. During the Middle Ages in Europe, mentally ill people were subject to physical punishment, and at times people were literally trying to beat the illness out of them. Like that was like a real thing that was occurring. So there's no question as to why people have the views that they do about people who are mentally ill in today's world. And then come the workhouses and asylums. So workhouses were public institutions where the poorest of people in a church parish were given basic room and board in return for work. And mentally ill patients were often placed in workhouses as a result. Clergy also played a key role, as medical practice was viewed as the logical duty of a priest to tend to ailments of their people. And then through this, the first asylum was founded in Valencia, Spain in 1406. But the asylum didn't really offer actual treatment at the time or comfort to the mentally ill. They forced patients to live in inhumane conditions with cruel abuse. There was no concept of actively caring for the mentally ill individuals, only keeping them away from the public. And this treatment in asylums actually continues for centuries, and reform didn't occur until the late 19th century. So that's quite some time to go from the 1400s to the 1800s. That's quite a jump of time. So that's a lot of people and a lot of trauma that people were enduring through these things, because people didn't quite understand mental health. And to some extent, people still don't fully understand it, but we're getting better. So moral treatment. Moral treatment was kind of discovered in around the 1800s over in Paris, actually, by someone named Pinel. Pinel created a hypothesis that mentally unhealthy patients needed care and kindness in order for their conditions to improve. And this was done at one of the hospitals that they had over there in Paris. They ordered the facility to be cleaned, patients to be unchained, and to put in rooms with sunlight, allowed to exercise freely within the hospital grounds, and to overall improve the quality of care that patients are receiving. Over kind of across the pond over the English Channel, I should say, there was the York Retreat Asylum, and that was actually founded by the Quaker Society. And so Quakers, for those who aren't aware, Quakers had traditions of treating all people, even the mentally ill, with respect, kindness, humility, and humanity. So their idea was to create an asylum that was more like a well-run household, although a strict household, but it was more of a household setting. Patients were expected to act civilized and polite, and encouraged to consider the consequences of disruptive behavior, and also to maintain the facility. And there was a system of rewards and punishments. But as we know now about what we know with mental health, expecting a person who's going through a mental illness or some type of a mental disorder or an episode, if you will, it's really hard to expect someone to act civilized, right? So we're still not quite there where we need to be with that at this point in the timeline. So then we fast forward a bit. Moral treatment was highly effective, but critics argued that the method didn't treat patients and actually left patients dependent on doctors and staff in the asylum setting for comfort. So then a few more years passed. By years, I mean quite a few years passed. And then we have Sigmund Freud, who, for many people, we know who this is. This is the father, if you will, of psychoanalysis. Freud was a famous Austrian neurologist and psychiatrist who developed psychoanalysis and the talking cure to encourage patients to talk about whatever came to mind. The theory was that avenues of conversation would open the door to patients and their unconscious mind, giving access to repressed thoughts and feelings that might have caused mental instability. And actually today, 25% of practicing therapists use methods developed by Freud. So that's kind of an interesting fact. And then with this talking therapy came this idea of like kind of psychosurgery, electroconclusive therapy, lobotomies, things like that. Psychosurgery is developed in the 1930s. The idea was to put the patient into a coma. The doctor would hammer a medical instrument through both eye sockets, and the process would cut the nerves connecting the frontal lobes, which regulated behavior and personality. The logic of lobotomies is that it would induce calm in patients who were uncontrollably hysterical and emotional, such as those experiencing schizophrenia, manic depression, or bipolar disorder. However, what ended up happening, similar to the triphoning that would happen centuries prior, this would render patients immature, lethargic, and it wasn't a cure. There were reports later of patients vomiting, the loss of bladder and bowel control, problems with vision, unnatural states of apathy, lethargy, hunger. So yeah, not too far off from where we were centuries prior. So it's almost like an ebb and flow of the timeline in regards to mental health and how we're viewing patients who are experiencing these things. And then in comes the psychopharmacological approach, and that's when we introduced lithium. So that was actually introduced into the market in 1949. Substances like chloral hydrate, bromides, and barbiturates were given to the mentally ill patients as sedatives in the late 1800s, but the doctors weren't happy with the short-term treatment potential. So then when lithium was introduced, it didn't cure the psychosis, but it did prove to be better at controlling symptoms than anything prior. And it was a better alternative than lobotomies. So that's kind of where it ended up being in like kind of the 20th century, if you will. So then flash to the 21st century, drugs like Thorazine, Valium, and Prozac became household names in the middle and late decades of the 20th century. And they were the most prescribed drugs for depression in the world. And then we did see a decline actually in facilities to house the mentally ill, though, because inpatient treatment centers usually would see clients for a few months at a time, while outpatient centers operate on a basis of no overnight stays. This actually created a problem of people with severe mental health problems who didn't have social or family networks to support their recovery. So this was still problematic, right? Both realities speak to the complexities of treating mental illnesses. Where incantations and brain surgery have fallen short, drug therapy and counseling have picked up the treatment baton for the 21st century to help millions of people achieve health and recovery. However, this evolution has come at a price, with many thousands of people falling prey to addiction and falling through the cracks of the modern healthcare system. So yeah, we are obviously seeing an addiction epidemic currently. There's a massive black market for illicit trading of expensive pills and prescription drug abuse. And these challenges indicate that proper treatment for mental health will not be easy or straightforward, but the evolution and advancements suggest that the improvements of today are infinitely better than that has come before us, right? So still room for improvement, but I just thought it would be interesting to kind of deep dive the mental health history, because I feel like we don't often think about that and how far we've come, but we definitely still have quite a ways to go. But I just thought that was interesting. So fighting mental health stigma. First, I want to put out there that it's okay to not be okay. That is something that is lost on many people. Everyone has experiences things differently. Everyone has gone through different experiences in their life. We don't all share the same experience. We shouldn't expect people to cope with experiences the same way. So today we're going to kind of discuss ways to fight mental health stigma, as well as coping skills in association with that stigma. So the first step to fighting mental health stigma is that I'm going to get a drink of water because I'm parched. And then always speak openly about mental health. So continue having conversations about mental health. Speaking openly about mental health will raise awareness by interacting with others around you. You may actually be surprised at people who have either shared your similar experience or who are just willing to listen to you talk. And I I am a product of that as well. I often talk very openly about my stuff. If you or someone you know has mental health issues, it's also very important to educate yourself and others. Become as informed as possible about symptoms, underlying causes, and ways to treat them. This will help you better understand how the illness truly affects you and others. There is this old saying that you name it to tame it. So the more you know about a mental health issue or a disorder, the better equipped you are to navigate that specific mental health disorder. So if it's like ADHD, do a deep dive on ADHD. If it is oppositional defiant disorder, that's something that we see in a lot of children. Take a look at what oppositional defiant disorder entails, and kind of explore that and see what you can learn about those things. Obviously, bipolar disorder, that's another big one. Depression, anxiety, to name a few. There's just a slew of mental health disorders out there, but the more educated you can be on a specific disorder or topic, the better off you're going to be. Additionally, show compassion. Even if you don't have firsthand experience with mental illness, you should always be willing to show empathy and compassion to those that do. This is actually super helpful to those struggling and dealing with depression, anxiety, and similar disorders. Simple affection like a hug can actually make a world of difference to those who feel isolated and alone from society. And there's plenty of studies to show this, that like a 5 to 10 second embrace of the person, it actually like reduces like cortisol in our bodies, and that's a stress hormone. And in short, never forget the humanity of those who are suffering. Additionally, we'll want to encourage equality between physical and mental illness. While we can't always physically see or feel the cause of illness, but we can often overlook it as not being serious because we can't see mental illness. It's not something that we can touch. It's not like if you're having a bad day, like mentally, you're not really bleeding necessarily. So people aren't going to know to put a Band-Aid on that. But the more you talk about it and the more you express your feelings, they're going to be like, oh, maybe we should figure out how to help you, calm down or kind of listen to what you're going through. Many mental illnesses can be just as serious and life-threatening, and sometimes more life-threatening than physical diseases like diabetes, cancer, and heart disease. There are actually other studies that show that the more trauma a person experiences in their youth, the more likely they are to have life-threatening concerns later on in life. But that's a conversation for another time. That's something called adverse childhood experiences, which I might deep dive next month if I feel like it. So do your best to remind yourself and others that mental health disorders are very real and they require very real treatment. It's not something that people are making up, especially depression. Depression can be very, very hard because to have, if you are going through a depressive episode, to have enough motivation to do something about it it's crippling. It is very, very hard for people who are experiencing that. And you can keep talking about treatment and coping skills, as this can keep the conversation going. It can help to think twice before making comments and using certain words and reference to those having an issue with their mental health, including yourself. In other words, just be kind, right? We want to make sure we're being kind, be patient. If you have a loved one or a spouse or someone who has mental health issues, it can be very, very taxing. If you have a child who has mental health issues, it can be very, very taxing and difficult to get through every day and everyday life. But it's important to take time to focus on those things with those people and to help them, but also help yourself. Never forget about helping yourself and to do what you need to do to, I guess, take care of yourself. Additionally, be honest about treatment. Treatment can require significant time and resources. Therapy and psychiatry have proven to be quite effective in most situations. As such, never be ashamed of being honest about seeing a mental health professional. It seems these days, if you're not seeing a therapist, that's kind of like the odd thing out, right? Like most people are seeing a therapist these days, whether they tell you or not, and as they should, right? It's very important to talk about our mental health. I also want to add that it's not lost on me that mental health and being able to talk about these things is almost like a privilege in our society because of the nature of where people come from and the experiences that they have had. It's understandable to not put your mental health first, but you need to. Putting your mental health is very, very important, because if your brain isn't functioning well, there's a solid chance your body won't be functioning well. And in turn, you won't be functioning well at work. You won't be functioning well in your everyday to-day life. It's very, very important to take care of your mental health and your mental well-being. It is a big deal and should be treated as such. Additionally, as you're sharing your experience with others, it can help normalize the feelings that others are having. And so things like support groups, that's where those things come into play. That's very, very helpful. And we've kind of discussed different resources to go to locally. So if you're ever needing help, please, please, please reach out to us and we can point you in the right direction. So now we're going to talk about stress. This is one of my favorite quotes. If you think everyone hates you, you probably need sleep. And if you think you hate everyone, you probably need to eat. And I like this quote specifically in regards to when you think about a baby. So a nonverbal, like 3-month-old baby, they aren't able to tell you what they want and need. They're going to cry, they're going to scream, they're going to sleep, they're going to poop, and they're going to eat. They have very basic biological functions when they're that little. And those things kind of stay with us, right? Like when we often forget that sometimes if we're having a bad day, like when's the last time you had something to eat? When's the last time you had something to drink? How much sleep have you had? Have you had like a standard 8 hours of sleep, or are you running on 2 to 3 hours of sleep every single night this week? The things like stress often manifest in difficulties with biological functions, right? And these difficulties, they'll stay with us. So if our needs aren't being met at the most basic biological level, like getting adequate sleep, having nutritious food, having digestive regularity, like sometimes if your tummy's upset, you're going to be upset. So we're likely to become overly tired, hangry. That's a combination of hungry and angry for those who don't know, and just generally dysregulated. So be sure to consider these biological functions when you're looking for signs of social emotional distress, and show some grace, because we all have bad days. And just get some sleep if you're able to. But I also understand that's not always a possibility for some people. And also having food isn't always a possibility for people, but there are resources that can help you. It's just a matter of reaching out to those resources to get that going. people here locally in Black Hawk County, the resources that we have, they're phenomenal. They are very helpful and they will assist you. You just have to be willing to make that first step. So now we're going to kind of talk about coping skills. So coping skills are something that you can do to sort of alleviate stress that you experience in your everyday day-to-day life. Coping skills can range anything from, you know, a very big routine that you do each and every day, like if it's writing out positive affirmations every morning and then exercising for an hour and a half and then, you know, things like that. Or it could be very small. It could be like within like 1 minute you take time to yourself to do a grounding exercise. So for those who aren't familiar, a grounding exercise is something that you can do to reduce like stress overall, anxiety, depression, things like that. Namely anxiety though, because when we are feeling anxious, our mind is going like 1,000 miles a minute and you're thinking about 5,000 terrible things all at the same time, all within your head. And it can be very, very hard to deal with. So a grounding exercise is something that you can do. And I've actually used this on my daughter before, and she's a little toddler in this, and it worked. And I was just amazed. But a grounding exercise, what you do is you name 5 things that you can see. So in this moment, I'll kind of do this with you all. But I can see a fan. I can see a picture of my family. I can see a statue of Wonder Woman. I can see a statue of Batman. I think that was 5 things. Then you go over 4 things that you can touch or feel. I can feel my desk. I can feel my chair. I can feel my water bottle, and I can feel my headphones. 3 things that you can hear. I can hear the sound of my lovely voice. I can hear the sound of a fan, and then I can hear the sound of the, whatever it's called, the air conditioner back here. 2 things that you can smell. I can smell the essential oils currently in my office, and then I can also smell the smell of what I had for lunch. And then 1 thing you can taste, I can taste my water. So it's that simple. And doing that kind of, it literally grounds our bodies to focus on like, hey, yes, your head right now is thinking about a million different things and a million worst case scenarios. But right now in this very moment in time, you are here sitting down on your chair in your office in Waterloo, Iowa, on planet Earth. Like that's where we're at. So that's how you ground yourself. You just kind of start naming things within your area. This works well for toddlers, I feel, because they can't always communicate what they need, but getting them to just calm down their emotions and calm down their body makes a world of difference, because you cannot have a conversation with anyone when they are like full blown, like angry mode, right? Like that is so hard to get through to a person. It's very important to take time to calm the body down without saying, hey, just calm down, because it's not always that easy. But the more you practice things like grounding exercises to kind of train your body to take deep breaths in stressful situations, the more often you do these things, the better it's going to work long term. So then we have 4-7-8 breathing. This is another strategy that's used to kind of calm the nervous system. So 4-7-8 breathing is when you inhale for 4 seconds, you hold your breath for 7 seconds, and then you exhale for 8 seconds. And then you would repeat this process a handful of times until you feel a sense of calm wash over you. So to do that, we'll just do it really quick because I'm all about these things. So we're going to inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 7, and then exhale for 8. So again, just doing that one time, I can already personally feel like a sense of whoo, like a weight off my shoulders. And then if you repeat that process, 3 to 5 times, you really start to just feel a general sense of calm. And this also works really well at the end of the day as you're laying in bed, after you've gotten done mindlessly scrolling through your phone. You can take these deep breaths right before bed. And actually, there's studies that show that this induces a better sleep. So if you're struggling to sleep, try 4-7-8 breathing prior to going to sleep at night. Additionally, if breathing in for 4 seconds, holding for 7, and exhaling for 8 is too hard, modify it to fit you. Like if it's inhaling for 2 seconds, holding your breath for 4 seconds, and then exhaling for 6 seconds, something like that. Do whatever you need to fit your needs best in that moment in time. These, again, are just coping skills that you can try. These are strategies that might work for you. Again, spending time in nature is something that's very, very beneficial to our bodies. As humans, we roamed the earth for thousands of years prior to having buildings, and that was how we operated, right? So being out in nature can really soothe our soul. There are studies that show that spending time in nature reduces stress and anxiety. It can boost immune functions and also boost creativity. So if you're ever having a time where you feel like your brain's not functioning at the capacity it should be, maybe just take a walk outside and look at the greenery that you see, like the trees that you see, the flowers that you see. Notice these things. Possibly do a grounding exercise outside, because there's plenty more things to see outside than there are inside. Additionally, there are fidgets. So fidgets are an affordable, quiet way to reduce stress. They can actually enhance learning if the learner is required, because the learner is required to use their left and right hemispheres of their brain. So a fidget is something like a fidget spinner. I'm not sure if anyone has seen those. I don't have one right now currently, but it's something that a lot of kids will use, and it's almost like a toy, but they're spinning it. But what happens is, as I said, it triggers the left and right hemispheres of the brain to like do something, and that can kind of occupy the mind enough to focus more on the task at hand. And I know that sounds complicated, it might sound a little goofy, but I promise that it works. Also, things like stress balls, those are almost like fidgets as well. If you don't have access to these things, finding like a pen, like clicking a pen can sometimes help. But obviously be mindful of your surroundings. That might be annoying to other people. But fidgets tend to be more socially acceptable as they are small, and they're more portable, things like that. And then we also have journaling. So journaling can enhance the sense of well-being. It boosts your mood and affect. It reduces the symptoms of depression before an important event, and also can improve working memory. So journaling doesn't have to be like complicated. I feel like people hear the word journaling, they're like, oh my gosh, I have to write 10 pages about my life and great detail. That's not really the case. Like, sit down in the morning when you wake up, just write out what you're feeling. Write down, hey, I don't feel like writing this right now. This is boring. You can write those things. That's called stream of consciousness journaling. And it is such a cool way to get the stressful things in your brain out on paper and just getting them away from your body, because it can be intense. If you are a person who's experiencing anxiety, stress, depression, things like that, there's tends to be a lot of things happening in your head. Getting those things out on paper, regardless of what those things are, just get them out there. And then they're not going to be in that head anymore. They're just going to be gone. If you make this a habit every single day, it's going to make a world of difference in your life. And you'll be so surprised at how much more creative you'll actually feel as well, because it kind of gets your brain spinning. Some people, they prefer to do journaling like on their phone. Like, there's plenty of apps that you can do journaling in. Your note app on your phone is also a good resource for that. Some people like myself, I prefer writing things out on paper. There's something about putting a pencil to a page that just really like does it for me. And it seems to calm me down most. Granted, my hand sometimes hurts because I have a lot to say most times, but it is something that does work. And then we have physical activity, right? So this isn't always an option for people, but this is something to consider. When I say physical activity, you don't have to like go to the gym 7 days a week for 5 hours a day. Like, you don't have to be like that. I mean, you can, if that's what floats your boat and if that's what makes you happy, but you don't have to. Things like walking, just going for like a 10-minute walk outside, that will reduce your stress levels phenomenally. Like I said, even if it's 10 minutes, maybe you have 20 to 30 minutes. That's awesome too. Things like yoga, you don't have to be intense. There's plenty of apps that you can look up. My favorite is Down Dog Yoga, or is it Down? Yeah, Down Dog Yoga. It's amazing. You should check it out. But you can look up things on YouTube for different yoga poses. You can just type in yoga on the internet and look up poses that way. Yoga is great. Just stretching your body in general, like doing an above the head stretch is really good. Kind of stretching out your back each morning, that feels really good. Or again, like lifting weights. If lifting weights like makes you happy, then do it. Do what you need to feel good. Additionally, nutrition. When it comes to depression, eating well can be very hard when you're feeling depressed. Eating healthy foods can be really hard, because sometimes eating healthy foods is very, very taxing. It requires a lot of prep work, because most healthy meals require like fresh ingredients, right? But if you don't have access to those things, or if you just can't do it and you're not feeling up to it, make a nice, easy, warm meal, right? So something like ramen noodles and a soft boiled egg, like throw those together, and it's something about a warm substance, like a warm meal hitting your body, like really does something for your soul. Or like chicken noodle soup or something like that. Things like that can really, really help boost your mood. Additionally, limiting energy drinks, especially if you're a person who experiences anxiety, that might be something to consider, because caffeine can actually increase symptoms of anxiety and can make you more stressed out, because the nature of caffeine is to make us like alert and like really like just, it's not always the best feeling to have. So make sure you're limiting those energy drinks. Additionally, water, not just drinking water, because you'll always hear drink more water because that's going to solve everything. It can, but also think about other ways that you can incorporate water into your routine. Perhaps taking a cold shower. There's actually evidence to show that cold showers, not warm, but cold showers can improve circulation, reduce inflammation, help with depression, relieves stress, promotes weight loss, boosts immunity, increases energy and alertness, improves skin and hair, and also supports reproductive health. Of course, for a little infant, probably don't do a cold shower unless there's like a fever or something involved. But this is something to consider if you're an adult experiencing things like depression. Sometimes the cold water hitting your face can really help. And again, this isn't the same as taking a bath, right? Because having the water poured down from the shower, it's a different feeling for your body than a bath would be. But with that being said, if a bath is what floats your boat, then take the bath, man. Like take the time that you need to relax and center yourself. In regards to drinking water, of course, drinking water does promote healthy skin, it boosts energy, there's better digestion, improved kidney health, and can also cure aches and pains of many kinds, but also those associated with dehydration. It seems to be that many people are not drinking enough water in today's world because there's a wide market for like energy drinks and soda and things like that. With that being said, even if you are drinking like energy drinks, that's still liquid going into your body. But water is probably the better option, as it can really hydrate your body and well-being person overall. So then this is something I wanted to point out. This is the coping skills sheet that I found. This was a quick Google search. If you have access to Google, type in coping skills and go to images, you will find an unbelievable amount of coping skills. If you're struggling, if you're like, well, this didn't work for me, or this didn't work for me, just type in coping skills and see what you find. Like on this sheet specifically, it's saying meditation. Sometimes meditation can be really, really hard. But in regards to coping skills, start small, especially with meditation, starting off at just like a 1 minute interval of time to be like, I'm going to meditate for 1 minute. That's a nice goal. That's a solid goal. It can be really hard to quiet our thoughts and our minds in a non-judgmental way, but starting off at 1 minute and then build up to 3 minutes and then build to 5 and then build to 10. Just make it a practice, right? Like you have to start somewhere. Playing with a pet, as I said before, enjoying nature, praying, spirituality, and going to, like, if you're a churchgoer, relying on those things can really help people through a tough time. As we know, it's kind of a combination of working with so having your spirituality come into play with also taking care of your health, and your physical well-being is important. So kind of connecting all of these things together, that's kind of where mental health is these days, right? It's not so much like, hey, we just need to address it in a physical way, or hey, we need to address this from like a religious point of view. It's kind of a mixture of everything, right? It's a mixture of these things because everyone is different, and one size doesn't fit all. Everything's going to be different. Again, here it's talking about schedule time for yourself, right? So take time for yourself to just be. If you have to cry, also just cry, let it out. It's okay to cry. These are very important things that I'm teaching my daughter too. Like, it's okay to cry. It's okay to feel mad. It's okay to want to like punch somebody if you're feeling upset. What's not okay is the action associated with that behavior, right? So it's not okay to punch people, but it's okay to feel the need to, because you're so frustrated, because it's okay to feel frustrated. So we need to really instill in our society and our children and adults that it's okay to feel big feelings. What matters is how we handle those feelings. Okay. So again, things like getting enough sleep, playing a game, taking a breather to just chill out. Also making a gratitude list. That's something that can be very helpful. Just naming things that you're grateful for and being like, hey, you know what, like today has been really hard, but I have a roof over my head. I have food in my belly. I have a loving family, things like that. That can be a great way to kind of calm those nerves and to help you from spiraling. This, of course, is just a list of sources and citations. And then that's what I have. So I'm going to X out of this so I can see everyone's faces again. Hello, friends. Okay, so I'm back now. Let's see. Okay, I'm here. So I feel, do we want to keep recording or should we stop recording at this time? What are we feeling? What does everyone think, I guess? Let's start there. I can always cut it later. Thoughts, feelings?
You can keep recording, I think.
Okay, very good. So what are we thinking about mental health at this point in time, friends? Do I need to call on people? I'm going to do it. Okay, Julie, you're up. I know that you had an event this past weekend with the church about mental health. How did that go?
Yeah, it went good, but I like the coping skill that you shared today. It's more clear. It's some stuff that we already do, but we didn't know that those was one of the coping skill. Like being grateful for things that we already have. I really like that because most of the time our eyes is focused on things that we don't have.
Mhm.
So being able to focus on things that we have, like being grateful, for me it's something
Yeah.
that helped me a lot in my life, but I never know that it's one of the coping skills.
Oh yeah.
So that's great.
Yep. Yeah, there's a huge thing. Lisa, what did you have?
Well, I was just wondering, so for a lot of, I know, immigrant and refugee communities, there's a greater stigma or of shame around mental health issues. And I
Mhm.
also know like it's maybe more comfortable for people to be able to share things in their, like with someone who understands them culturally and linguistically. And so I've been trying to like rack my brain around who in the community, like is there a list of providers, like mental health providers for various like identity groups? And I'm thinking not just in terms of obviously, Spanish speaking or French speaking or whatever, but also like for people who identify as LGBTQ, um, or those kinds of things. Because I've had a few inquiries in the past few months, like from people from different groups, and I wasn't really sure what to tell them.
Wouldn't that be awesome? That's actually a really great idea. And we here at the health department, we've been like really focused on mental health because we're hearing this from a lot of different sources, like, hey, mental health, mental health. So that's actually a really good point. Because it's hard to talk about stuff with people if you don't like have common ground with them. So if you don't feel that connection, it can be really hard to like express yourself in a way that will make you feel better. So I think that's something that we could definitely work on. And I think what I kind of am wanting to do, because of this mental health is becoming like a bigger and bigger thing, maybe like once a month doing like some type of a mental health topic for this specific forum. So I currently don't have time to create a list right now, but I would love to, if I can find the resources, because in my other program with First Five, I'm familiar with quite a few resources, but finding culturally specific ones I think would be huge. There's already a couple that I'm kind of aware of, but I'm not sure what their openings are like currently. But yeah, you bring up a really, really valid point for that.
So maybe like with a handful of people in the community, we could start sharing some of those resources, like
Yeah.
maybe create a Google Doc or something.
Yeah, that would actually be super cool. Let me jot that down.
Because I know like of maybe two Spanish speaking, and neither of them are listed like, so if I just go to Unity Point, like it's not going to necessarily, and not everybody works in the hospital or connected to a hospital system either.
Right.
So
Yeah, there's not like a hub to go to. I know one city has their website. I'm not sure what that looks like currently, but that might be an avenue to check out.
okay.
Because I think they had like you could like type in at one point in time, like type in the specific resources and it would auto populate. But yeah, that's something that I'll look into to see how we can approach that, because I think you're exactly right. I think that like I know personally, like I prefer, like my therapist is a woman. I prefer talking to a woman about my issues more so than a guy.
Yeah.
But some people are different. Everything's up to the person, right? So
Yeah. And it's hard for me to find someone. And I know there are a lot of people like me in that field.
yeah.
So like, for people who are like first generation,
Yeah, and,
or
and there's a whole other layer to that, right? And like I would really like the conversation to continue in regards to the immigrant refugee population, the experiences. I'm not familiar with those experiences personally, but I think making it a point to understand like, hey, like mental health hasn't always been a top priority for you, because it really couldn't be. There's other things at play, but it should be a top priority because you're here now, and your mental health is very, very important. Let us help you, kind of a thing, right? So we need to kind of collaborate more to figure that out. So that's something that we have in mind for sure.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. And Carol, did you have anything to add? Okay. Yeah, so that's kind of what I have today, but I do know that this is something that, like I've said, it's very, very important to address. So if you have, if anyone, like, I appreciate you, Lisa, for making that suggestion. If there are other suggestions that you have, as far as like what we can do to help this community, that would be great. I think today's meeting was more about like providing coping skills, because we can say, hey, check out Families First Counseling Services, check out Hope Tree Counseling, check out Lutheran Services, and we can name all of these entities and agencies that can help. But I think equipping people with things like coping skills, like these are strategies that you can use in your everyday to-day life to help you deal with these things, is great, because there is often wait lists right now too for therapy. And that's another hurdle that we have to uncover, because a lot of people are realizing, oh, I can go to a therapist now, and that's wonderful, but there's often a wait list of and it could be several weeks, and that can be hard when you have an immediate crisis. I do know there's Elevate down in Town Waterloo. They have a mobile crisis unit, but the main thing, there are resources to go to if you need to talk to somebody. And the more we do those things, and the more we talk to people about what we're experiencing, the more normal it becomes, and also the better people are going to feel, because you feel more understood, and that's very, very important. In regards to children's mental health, I'm a solid resource for that within the First Five program. That's basically what my entire program is about, is supporting the mental well-being of children from birth to 5 years old, but also supporting families, because being a parent is hard and it can be stressful. And then also when you birth a human, then there's a whole thing of postpartum stress, right? Or postpartum disorder. That can be very, very hard, and it can be hard to identify, it can be hard to pinpoint, and also hard to navigate. So there's all these layers to think about. So that's kind of where I'd like to end it, at least for the recording today.